Okay, good morning and welcome to everybody joining today for today's webinar hosted by HAYNE Solutions. We're going to tell you all about what's new in the latest version of Planning Analytics Workspace. Conscious we've only got 30 minutes scheduled for this, so in order to keep to time, we will follow up with a separate email of contact details to answer any of the questions that get put into the box during the session. We'll also be able to share the recording and the slide deck as well afterwards. So what we're going to cover in today's webinar, we'll give you a quick introduction to who HAYNE are, for those of you that don't know us, what we do and who we work with. Going to cover off very briefly what Planning Analytics is, give you a brief overview of it, and then Michael will go into detail and show you some of the new features and functionality that's available in the latest version and how it can help add efficiency, collaboration, and a greater level of analysis to all of your planning needs. We'll then cover off a bit of a further information, what you can follow up with, how we can help you, and then we will wrap it up with a summary and try and get through any questions. So who are your hosts? Myself, Tom Hall, Account Director, and Michael Wyatt, who is our Principal TM1 Consultant at HAYNE. So who are HAYNE? HAYNE are a leading partner for so many organisations within the analytics space. We are a leading consultancy with experience of designing and delivering performance management and business intelligence solutions for organisations of all shapes and sizes. We pride ourselves on providing a tailored approach whilst being open, honest and transparent throughout. That's a little picture of us at our summer do last year. However, we have grown considerably since then. So who are HAYNE? Been established for 10 and a bit years. We celebrated our 10th anniversary last year, and we have gone on to grow to a team of 36, including 3 apprentices. Majority are based from our head office in Stratford-upon-Avon, and we are predominantly Office of Finance focused, and we partner with leading FPM and CPM software vendors such as IBM, LucaNet and Tagetic. Our customer journey follows a typical life cycle with multi-layered discovery calls, deep diving and understanding your needs through a number of meetings, product demonstrations, and often more than one, so we can tailor the demonstrations to see how it can really help you. We will then engage and advise you throughout the project, and our engagement team will ensure that the project is delivered end to end and within strict governance frameworks. So who are our customers? As you can see, this is just a small selection of customers, and you can see there are a multitude of sectors and sizes within companies, and that tailored approach allows us to work with all of them. So shortly I'm going to hand you over to Michael to give you the demo of what's new in Planning Analytics Workspace. However, I just wanted to touch on what Planning Analytics is for those of you that are perhaps a little unfamiliar. So Planning Analytics is a business performance management software suite designed to implement collaborative planning, budgeting and forecasting solutions, the ability to look at interactive what-if scenarios, the flow through of the impact of those, as well as an analytical reporting suite as well. One of those is the web-based interface that links in called Planning Analytics Workspace. I will now hand you over to Michael, who's going to talk through Workspace in a bit more detail. All right, thank you. Over to you, Michael.
No problem. Thank you, Tom, and good morning to everybody. As we said, we're going to take a look at some of the new features in the Planning Analytics Workspace for the last 4 releases for the end of last year to present, so for versions 2.047 through to 2.052. And in this webinar, we will demo in full some of the new features, such as the ability to build a whole cube or update a dimension by dragging in an Excel file, the ability to calculate on the fly aggregations of mixed values, and the ability to quickly turn numbers into thousands and millions. Other features such as changes to hierarchies, menus, and log files to record the status of your database, we will talk about and show you some screenshots of. Of course, if following the webinar, any of you would like any more details of any of the new features or would like a full demo of Workspace, please do contact HAYNE and we'd be more than happy to provide this for you. So before we get started, how do you know what version of Planning Analytics Workspace you are on? Well, quite simply, once you log on, you select the question mark from the top right of the screen and select the option about IBM Planning Analytics. Your version number will then be displayed in the bottom corner of the information page. So the first thing we're going to do is to do a demo of some of the new features more focused around reporting and dashboarding creation. And we're going to begin with creating a cube by importing a text file. Now in Planning Analytics Workspace, anyone is able to create a cube and build dimensions using Workspace's intuitive drag and drop functionality and wizards. You don't need to be able to understand code to write processes to do so. So if you have a CSV file with your data in, you can build objects in Workspace. This is a great way, for example, to build one-off ad hoc cubes to load data that otherwise sits out of your Planning Analytics model and analyze it using the power of Planning Analytics multidimensional functionality. So we will see these screens when we go into the demo. However, when creating a cube, Planning Analytics will build your dimensions, it will build the cube, and it will load in your data, ready for you to analyze immediately and begin to build dashboards on top of it. There have also been improvements to importing dimensions. Previously, using the Workspace import functionality, you could only import data into an empty hierarchy, not update it. But now you can. Again, we will see this screenshot shortly in the demo. You can also select in a similar way to when building a cube, whether the dimension structure is to be leaf only, to contain parent-child relationships, or be a multi-level hierarchy. This allows you to quickly create dimensions with a relevant structure. You are able to import dimension members and attributes, as well as specify the member type and weight. And finally, when importing into a dimension, there are the options to have Planning Analytics Workspace both create a process to enable the dimension to be updated in the future and to create a chore to run this process if required. So let's now have a look at building a cube and updating dimensions in Workspace. So first of all, you'll see on the left-hand side of my tree, I have a TM1 instance with no cubes, dimensions, processes, or chores in it. And this is what we're going to start to build now. As I say, we can do this by bringing in a text file. So we have a text file here with our actual sales data for 2019. If we have a look in here, this contains all the information that we need to build our cube and populate it with the data, including version, period, customer, product, and measures, which are going to form the dimensions of our cube, as well as some hierarchy data. For example, period is going to roll up into quarter and then year, and product is going to roll to product type, product category, and then given all product consolidation. We also have the values we want to import into our cube that are going to be held against units, unit price, unit cost, etc. So let's do this. To create our cube, we very simply right-click, import data, and it gives us the option to drag a file in or to browse for a file. We're going to use a drag and drop option. So we drag our file into Workspace and click Continue. The first thing that we're going to see is a preview of the data that we saw in our Excel file. When we move on to the next screen, this is now where we set up the cube and the dimensions. First of all, we're going to give the cube a name. We're going to call it sales. Now we need to start building the dimensions. The first dimension we're going to build is a dimension called version. Now, as I said, we have various options for how we set up our dimensions. So we can set them up with a parent-child relationship as leaf-only dimensions, or, and in the case of what we're doing now, a multi-level import. So we click this button over here. Now, this version dimension is only actually going to have one level, and we're going to map the version column in our CSV file to be the version dimension. Next, we're going to create our period dimension, of which our leaf level elements are going to be period, and these are going to roll up into quarters and then years. We need to add a few more dimensions into our cube, the first of which is going to be customer. This is going to be a single level dimension, taking customer from our CSV file, and then product, which we're going to use the hierarchy in the CSV file, with product being our lowest level, which then rolls up into product type, product category, and then we need one further level for our product dimension, so we can add a new level and use that new level for our top level product consolidation. The last dimension we want is measures, for which we're going to use the measures column in our CSV file. Then all that we need to do is now map our data, which is going to be numeric data and is the data held in our value column of our CSV file. And that's it. We'll leave these other options as they are and create our cube. So Workspace is now going to create the dimensions, build the cube and populate the cube. And we see here that all rows of data in our CSV file have been successfully processed. We click on OK, and here we are, our cube view. And you'll see on the left-hand side in the tree here, we now have our sales cube with the dimensions that are making that cube up that we've just created. So now we can start to analyze our data immediately in the same way that we would any other cube. We can move our dimensions around and start to create a view that is useful for the analysis that we want to perform. And with a little bit of formatting, which we're not going to cover in this webinar, we can obviously tidy things up to make it a little bit more user-friendly as we wish. However, as you might have noticed when we built the cube, when we built our customer dimension, we just built it with a single level, which is great, but maybe not much use for analysis. Now, obviously, we could have imported the customer hierarchy at the same time as building the cube, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to do that now. So for this, I'm just going to open up a new sheet on Workspace just to keep it clean and easy to see, and bring in the customer dimension. So on the left here are all the customers that were imported when we built the cube. And if I switch to show the attributes against these, we'll see that there are no attributes against any of these customers. But now we can update this dimension, again, using a CSV file. So we have a CSV file called customer update. And if we were to look at this, this very simply holds the customers and then the consolidations that we want to build on top. So the customers are going to roll into customer type and the total customer consolidation. And at the same time, we're going to apply an attribute for the currency for each of these customers. So let's do that. So back in Workspace, what we need to do is to import that file. It's the customer update file. And as with building a cube, the first thing we'll see is a preview of the data that we're going to import. Again, as when building the cube, we have the option of how we want our dimension built. And again, we're going to choose a multi-level dimension, for which the leaf level, as we know, is going to be our customer, consolidating up into customer type and consolidating further to our top level customer. We'll leave our member type and our weight as it is, but we want to add in our new attribute. So we add a new attribute that we're going to call currency. And that currency attribute is going to pull its data from the currency column of our CSV file. As I said previously, we can, at the same time as updating this dimension, have a process saved and a process scheduled if we want to. So this action can be replicated in the future. So we're going to do both of these. So I'm going to create a process and a chore with the same name and import data. So when we do this, we will see immediately the changes that Workspace has made to the dimension. We can now see the hierarchy structure built into the dimension, and we can see the currency attribute held against the elements in it. Down the bottom here, Workspace is displaying the chore that has been created based on the new process that we've built, and we can set the frequency to run that chore if we desire. We can also see the chore in our tree, as well as the process that is created if we wanted to have a look at that as well, showing you the data source and the script that Workspace has automatically created for updating our dimension. So going back to our cube view, we can now immediately use that new hierarchy in our view. And we can then start to analyze in the same way as we would normally, straight away, however it is we want to display the information, including, if we so desired, to bring in the new attribute that we have just created on this dimension. So moving on, we're going to look at applying aggregation calculations in a view. So previously, you were able to apply calculations to values on the fly, for example, to sum or average numbers, or to show minimum or maximum values. But when using sum or average, this is not always applicable to everything in your view. For example, if you have both gross margin and gross margin percent, these need to be treated differently. So now Planning Analytics Workspace allows users to aggregate numbers, which uses the underlying cube logic to correctly display the aggregations of your data. And these calculations, like all poor calculations, are dynamic and update as you navigate and drill through the data in your view. This means users can quickly create the reports that they need. And as well as apply normal formatting in Workspace, you can now quickly abbreviate your numbers into thousands and millions. As with calculations, this formatting is dynamic. This is a common piece of functionality a lot of our customers ask for, but now they're able to do this themselves on the face of their reports. So let's take a look at how we applied aggregations and abbreviations in our view. So for this again, I'm going to use a new clean sheet, and I'm actually going to use an instance with a pre-populated sales cube. And this is, as I mentioned before, because the aggregations function relies on underlying cube rules. And by this I mean the following. So we have a view here very similar to the view that we just created from our CSV file. The only difference is that it has got some rules behind the cubes so that the consolidated numbers do the right thing. So units will add up the sum of the parts, as will the gross margin, but the unit price, cost and gross margin percent correctly calculate at the consolidated level and do not add the sum of the parts. But what if we wanted a half-year total? Well, previously we could have added up Q1 and Q2, which would have been fine for our gross margin, but not for our gross margin percent. By now, by selecting Q1 and Q2, right-clicking and going to create calculation, we have an aggregate option. If we wish, we can put in a name for this aggregation and click OK. So now we have half year with units and gross margin adding up and gross margin percent calculating properly. Again, if we so wish, we can right click and format this to something that's a little bit more pleasing. And as I say, this is fully dynamic. So if we were to bring in customers, our units, as we drill through our hierarchy, add up the sum of the parts, but our gross margin percent correctly is at every level we go to, doing the correct calculation for the gross margin. If we look at our gross margin value, we can see that these are rather large numbers and we may not want to see these in their full. So again, we can very quickly right click and format these to show in either thousands or millions. I'm going to choose millions. And we'll see here them suffixed with an M. Again, we can start to move these around as we wish to perform whatever kind of analysis that we wish on the cube. So what else has changed? So there's been various new features that have been added to the set editor to make it easier and more intuitive to use. You can focus on one area at a time, which means you can hide the pane that you're not currently working in to enable you to focus on that area. For example, the available members or the current set. You can quickly maximize the set editor by clicking the max icon. You can also use drag and drop to bring members into the current set from the available members. And there is the new easy access toolbar, which makes it easy to edit the members in the current set, with the most frequently used functions being available. For example, to cut and paste, keep or remove, and to apply various sorting options. Finally, you can easily configure the default display for available members and the current set. For the available members pane, you can choose to display the default view as the default set, all routes, all members, or all leaves. And for the current set pane, you can choose whether to display the members as a hierarchy or an MDX definition. So let's take a quick look at these. So for this, I'm going to use a customer dimension. So when I come into my customer dimension, you will see that it opens with the available members by default set on the default view and our current set showing the hierarchy. We'll come back to this later. So as you said, we can easily hide things that we don't want to see to focus on the pieces that we do. If we wanted to maximize the screen, we can do so. And we have our easy access toolbar, which if we hover over the icons, it shows us what they do if we're not sure. So let's take a look at the drag and drop function. Now let's imagine that our current set has a couple of members, but we want to add another member to it. If we just insert that member, it will drop in at the bottom of the current set, which is fine because I can reorder it. But with drag and drop, I can bring that new dimension or dimensions straight into where I want to see it in the current set to make it applicable for the view that I'm trying to create. So the last thing we're going to do here is look at the configuration. And for this, I'm going to set my view to look for all customers and all descendants of customer. But if next time I come in here, I don't want to see the hierarchy on the right, I want to see my MDX definition, I can change it. If on the left-hand side, I don't want my available members to default, I can change that, for example, to show the leaf members of the dimension. So when I come back in, we will now see that the available members shows all routes, and we have the MDX definition on the right-hand side for the current set. So what else has changed? So hierarchies are a useful feature and are now sorted alphabetically, so the order of them is predictable. So what does this mean? Well, firstly, the default hierarchy appears first. The default hierarchy, for those who are unaware, is a hierarchy with the same name as the dimension. Next, the leaves hierarchy, containing a list of all leaf level elements within the dimension, appears last, and all other hierarchies are stored alphabetically between them. Finally, in terms of general user feature updates, there have been changes to some of the menu options. Access to the refresh, reload book, save and save as options has moved to make things more intuitive. There have also been other changes made to the edit mode and personal menu icons, and there are also new homepage and maximize screen icons. Now, the last three new features focus on the development and administration of your workspace model. So we'll just touch on these so you're aware of them. But as I said at the start, should you want us to go over any of these in more detail, please contact us after this webinar. So the first of these is that the ability to enable process security access is now available for within POR. Enabling security access allows a process to modify security data. By default, it's disabled, which means the process cannot modify security data. However, by enabling security access, the process can modify your security. You can now identify broken buttons. So when you migrate a book that contains a button to navigate to another sheet, but the target of the button is not migrated, you can view a list of migrated assets that result in broken links. This then allows you to take action to restore broken buttons. You have a snapshot log to alert you to broken buttons, a warning icon indicating broken buttons, and a log report to show assets with missing button targets. Lastly, you can download a log file that records changes to the availability status of your database, for example, to review start and stop times. So that brings us to the end of the demo, and I'll now hand you back to Tom to finish and wrap up the webinar.
Thanks, Michael. So I'm really conscious of time, so very briefly, all the information that you need from today's webinar will be sent around to the attendees, so please feel free to share them within your organisations as well for anybody that might be interested. You can also go to our website. There's lots of resources on there, not just on Planning Analytics Workspace, but Planning Analytics as a whole, Planning Analytics for Excel, and other Cognos applications that we partner with. And then at HAYNE, basically another brief overview. So we can offer best practice advice, hosting, any installation and upgrade issues that you have, system development, so developing your reports or getting the best out of your system, training and fully fledged demos. So please do get in contact if you want any further information. The next steps. So the next steps are to contact us. So you can contact Teresa or info@hayne.co and then our phone number there should you want to, and we can discuss anything further with you. Okay, so thank you very much for joining today, and we look forward to speaking to you soon. Thank you.